Hello, this is Craig with Redchip. Thank you for joining today's event with Nova Minerals, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker NVA. With us today, we have Christopher Gertisen, Executive Director and CEO of Nova Minerals. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we will answer your questions. Submit a question at any time. Click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical fact should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. I now turn the webinar over to Chris. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Craig, and welcome to the Nova Minerals webinar. What we have is the Estelle project here in Alaska, where we're developing North America's next major gold and critical minerals district. At a glance, large project, over 200 square miles, where to date we've defined almost 10 million ounces across two deposits, bulk tonnage deposit up north at Korbel, and what's really become the jewel in the crown down south at RPM, a very high-grade deposit there. In addition to that, 20 other known prospects at various stages of advancement that include gold, copper, silver, critical elements, and the big one there is antimony, and one I've pointed out here on the map is the stibium prospect, where we aim to get started with the antimony. So we've really become a dual commodity company. You know, we've always been a gold company, and really the antimony found us, and we've been pursuing that. Both of these elements at record high prices, and they continue to rise. And so we're really in the right place at the right time with the right commodities. Great opportunity for investors. So we're in the Tintina Gold Province here in Alaska, and a lot of activity going on here. We're just on the southern end of that belt. A lot of the majors, Kinross, Barrick to the west of us, Newmont Snow Lines in the belt. And so lots of activities. And we're on the southern end of that belt there. And we're just going to zoom into South Central Alaska here. First thing to note is we're all on state of Alaska land. So there's no federal land, no native corporation land to contend with. What that means when it comes to permitting, it'll be a much more streamlined permitting process, as well as just day-to-day, very, very pleasant experience just working with our state agencies. In terms of infrastructure, so important with these projects, access, we have a 4,000-foot plus airstrip on the site. We can bring in very large aircraft to support the project year-round. We're actually looking to expand that and bring in even larger aircraft. The pink line is our winter road. A lot of heavy freight haul there. It is seasonal, and we're getting very excited about the red line. That's the West Susitna Access Road project, a whole economic corridor through there. Lots of things going on. We're only one of many beneficiaries. It's a state-funded project, and so that's looking to come online. They're looking to break ground on that this year, and that'll basically make us a suburb of Anchorage in Alaskan terms, a 100-mile road. Power, lots of options there. The blue line, potentially tap into the gas pipeline that's proposed to head out to the Donlin project to the west of us. We looked at our own transmission line, the yellow line. Also, there's a coal project gaining momentum in the area, which would be one of the most cost-effective solutions. And also then there's micro nuclear reactors, big push for that in the state of Alaska. We're looking at that. And then diesel generators, which is of course how most projects do it. And we're looking at diesel generators for a startup option, but longer term, we have these other options as well. So zooming in on the project, you know, number of areas we've been working on there. The red circles are mainly our gold areas, and then the blue is for our antimony there at Stibium and Styx. Again, for the gold, we have our resources defined at Korbel and RPM, and then really what we've been focused on the gold and on the antimony, and as well as gold in those prospects, is Stibium and Styx here. So ultimately, this is a larger project. You know, we did a scoping study. It's a bit dated now, but you know, it's showed promising economics, but you know, it comes with quite a hefty price tag. They have higher capital expenditures, and so we do have the option, which we're focused on now, of the lowest capex startup option. Just we're going straight after RPM here for a very low capex, small footprint startup option, and then grow ourselves into the larger project. At RPM, to date, our drilling, we've defined 3 main zones there: north, south, and valley. Here's the actual drilling that we've conducted. And you can see most of the close space drilling is around RPM north here, and that's really where we're aiming to start. Here's some typical intercepts at RPM, and you can see these are just spectacular, world class. One to read off here, RPM 005. Love this one. 400 meters at 3.5 grams per ton, including 132 meters at 10 grams per ton. And I could go on and on there, very representative, particularly of that RPM North zone. And here's RPM North. This will be our starter pit startup area where that high grade material is right on the surface. We'll get straight into it and then grow ourselves into the larger project. I'm putting on a 1 gram per ton cutoff grade shell. And even at that high grade cutoff, you can see how it hangs together. Still very nice, thick, broad, continuous high grade zone there at RPM North. And now down in the valley, we're seeing another one of these high grade zones starting to take shape. And we continue to infill drill that. 0.3 gram per ton grade shell. And this is at this pit you see here that's generated. That's at a $1,800 gold price for our scoping study. But you can see outside the pit, there's plenty of resources hanging out below the valley here and off on the side of RPM North. So we continue to infill drill those areas. And of course, with a rising gold price, the next iteration of these pits at over $2,000 gold, these pits will just get larger and deeper, and we'll be capturing more and more of that resource as we move forward. In terms of resource classification, most of the resources at RPM North here are measured and indicated. And I should note that with this resource model, which was done at the beginning of 2023, that this drilling here is not included in the resource. And so our next resource update after this year's drilling program, this zone will only set to get bigger. What our target here is at RPM North is 500,000 ounces at 2 grams per ton, with an internal zone of about 250,000 ounces of 5 grams per ton. And then the remainder of the deposit remains inferred. So quite a bit of work still to do there to infill drill and step out, because these zones are, all of our geological data indicates they're connected. And so our main targets here for this year's drilling and beyond is to link up the south and the valley, 600 meters of strike length there, big volume of potential upside. Also between the valley and north, we're going to be hitting with that with this year's drilling as well. So currently this deposit in total is about 1.1 million ounces with all the zones. We see this as easily a 2-3 million ounce deposit. I just got to get in there and prove that with further drilling, that the drilling season is right around the corner. We're hoping to hit this with up to 2 drill rigs this year. In addition to that, in the RPM area, there's lots of upside, good exploration upside. What you're looking at here is our surface exploration samples. And you can see we have an RC Scout, an RC rig that the company owns. And we're planning to put the first drill holes into some of these targets here, a bit of scout drilling, and hopefully discover more of these RPM North type bonanza zones. You can see along the ridge line here. Let me just change the color there. Here along the ridge, this target as well down here on the nose of the ridge, this target here. So 3 targets along the ridge. And then also out in the valley, that grid sampling you see is what we've discovered there is it's eroded material off the RPM North high grade deposit, and it's just eroded down here. And what we're seeing is 1.7 kilometer strike length of eroded material already crushed up, ready to dig. And the red, you're seeing, 1-2 gram per ton zones there, very continuous. And so we're planning to do some test drilling here into this zone, and we'll be focused down on this lobe here. But that's big potential upside. It's about 50 meters of fill of eroded material, and if that hangs together at over 1 grams per ton, ready to dig, then that has significant upside. So we plan to attack that this year with our drilling as well. Of course, our plan here is to start up at RPM, and we already have a spot here for a small footprint startup plant that'll be scalable. It's a very low capex. We're looking at something under $100 million capex range, trying to fit it into that box. And it's conventional off-the-shelf technology, nothing real fancy going on here, all based on metallurgical test work. We just crush, we mill, we float, we regrind, and then we leach, and we're already getting over 95% recovery that our test work has shown here at this plant. And it's an ideal location because not only is it situated next to RPM, but also next to one of our exciting exploration areas just 5 kilometers to the north of RPM here at Train. And at Train, what you're looking at is surface sampling. It's all mostly outcropping there, so it's just old school geologist boots on the grounds. That's how we discover these things at Train prospect proper. You can see up to 80 grams per ton, high grade gold all over the place. A kilometer to the north of that, we have the Trumpet prospect, same story, high grade gold up to 132 grams per ton. And here we're starting to recognize the multi-element potential, percents of copper, hundreds of grams per ton silver, antimony, and many of these other critical elements here at Trumpet. Also at Shoeshine on the east side in the Train area. You can look at this one here, 1,290 grams per ton. It just shows you the extreme high-grade potential at Estelle. Also, multi-element potential on this prospect as well. Copper, silver, antimony. And then the last one I'll point out in this area is the Muddy Creek prospect. This one tends to be gold only. A little bit of silver, but not much else. Very clean metallurgically, as they say, up to 128 grams per ton. On average, over that 1 kilometer strike length of the Muddy Creek prospect, even in the soil samples, we're seeing an average grade of 2.5 grams per ton. And that, soils are just usually used to generate targets for drilling, but they're ore grades in the soil. So very exciting. All those prospects are drill ready targets. And we plan to do some of that work this year to make further discoveries to join RPM and also Korbel and add to our resource inventory. So that's the starter mine at RPM that I mentioned. So our idea is to grow ourselves then into the larger project with our own cash flow and or take on a strategic partnership. Not many of these district scale projects left in the world today. So a lot of the majors, mid-tiers, they're knocking on our door. Getting into our data room, these kind of things. So they're really interested in something like that. So we would be open to some type of a JV or something like that with a major company to grow ourselves into the larger project. But growing into the larger project means scaling up RPM as well as moving then into the Korbel deposit up north, which I'll take you to now. So Korbel, same story. Lots of prospects we're working on there, but I'll take you into those black dots where we have the resources. The Korbel main deposit, huge system, bulk tonnage, 2.5 kilometer strike length on this thing. And then a short distance away, we made a new discovery here at Cathedral in early days, but at a minimum, we see another Korbel main taking shape. Now we're in a long section looking east through Korbel main deposit, 800 million tons at an average grade of 0.3 grams per ton. So very large bulk tonnage system. Now there is a higher grade feeder core through there. And what I mean by that, if you look at some of these intercepts here, 94 meters at a gram, 101 meters at 1.3 grams, including 30 at 2.4, 113 meters at a gram. So that's what I mean by the higher grade feeder core. And when I put on the 0.5 gram per ton grade shell, that encompasses that core very continuous down along the strike length of that deposit. 0.3 gram per ton grade shell really bulks out. So what do we intend to do with this beast of a deposit? There's the high grade feeder core comes right up to the surface. So that'll be our starter pit right there. And then the lower grade portions of the deposit, we're looking at utilizing heap leach for some of the lowest grades. And then also critically utilizing ore sorting. So ore sorting technology, we've done extensive test work on that. We're seeing a 10-time upgrade. We're taking 0.4, 0.5 gram material, and we're able to upgrade that up to 4 to 5 grams per ton. So that's really our focus there and why we include all those lower grade resources at Korbel Main, because of that ore sorting we intend to employ. The remainder of Korbel Main, still lots of most of the in-pit resources are indicated at Korbel Main. Working on this years before we even discovered RPN, but there's plenty of resource upside around the edges there at Korbel Main. And then of course, Cathedral is still inferred, early days on that. Here's some surface samples at Korbel. And this is what I mean. If you look at some of these grades, 114 grams per ton, 98 grams per ton, that's what we're separating out with the ore sorters. If you understand the deposits, there are these sheeted veins in there. When you selectively sample those veins are running ounces per ton. And that's what we're separating out. You can see those ounces per ton in those grades in those samples. That's how we readily achieve that 10-time upgrade I described. And then we also, in terms of processing, done quite a bit of work here. Same type of process as we have at RPM, but just to recap here for Korbel, this is where we'll utilize the ore sorters for sure. So high grade coming out of that starter pit straight to the mill. the lowest grade portions of the deposit straight off to a heap leach pad, and then we'll have a medium grade material we'll classify, utilize these ore sorters, focus on maximizing the grade, then the accepted portion out of the ore sorters running 4 to 6 grams per ton off to the mill, and then the reject portions out of the ore sorters still have some grade in it. We'll send those off to a heap leach pad. That's the idea of very efficient resource extraction, maximizing the total gold recovery over the life of mine, and all that straight to the bottom line, of course. So that's Korbel. Now, further in exploration, lots of upside. I'll take you to the Stony area here. Same story. Numerous prospects with high-grade gold, thousands of grams per ton silver, percents of copper, and that we're working on here. And this just shows you the pipeline of additional prospects as we move forward that'll continue to come online for decades and decades of mine life, and also we do have porphyry copper potential here. We think we're onto one of those here at Wombat and also at West Wing. And then the critical minerals we're particularly seeing in this area and elsewhere. And the big one there is antimony that's drawing so much interest. So one of our antimony prospects just on the outside here we call Styx. Decent gold, but there's massive stibnite veining all over the surface. And you can see some of these numbers here, up to 54% antimony as we sample that vein that just runs through this area. So Styx is one of our antimony and gold prospects. But further on the antimony, we talked about the gold story, and I don't want to dilute that, but we do have the opportunity. And like I said, the antimony found us, and we've drawn a lot of interest. There's no antimony production in the United States. We're really been a first mover in this space and drawn a lot of interest from the Department of Defense to reestablish and fully secure U.S. supply chains. And so we are well advanced in our DoD grants, and we're feeling very positive about that. And our first order of business is here at the Stibium prospect. And at Stibium, again, massive stibnite veining all over the surface, that antimony trisulfide material. You can see a photo there, and some of the numbers that we're seeing here over a 800 meter by 400 meter strike length. Here's some of the grades that we see up to 60%, and it just goes on and on over that 800 by 400 meter area. There's good gold in this stuff as well. Here's some of the numbers we get from the gold. So it is an antimony gold deposit, and we intend to exploit both. So this will definitely add to our gold resource as well. And we intend to drill this year. Here's the gold soil sample heat map. You can see that it overlays very nicely. We intend to drill this year with up to 3 rigs, and which is suffice to get us our initial resource estimate, an initial resource out of this for antimony and gold, and start to bring this antimony production online. And the first order of business is to produce antimony trisulfide. And this is what the DoD grants are for. And so antimony trisulfide is basically stibnite. It's the mineral that we see in the ground. Is a straightforward task. You dig it up, concentrate it, pulverize it down, a few military specs there, but that's the material that's required for the munitions, right? If you know about antimony, of course, it's used in all the clean tech, green tech, high tech, semiconductors, all of that. But the reason the DoD is so interested in this is because it's used in all 155 mil artillery shells. All medium and small caliber arms require it in the primer, and then for some of these armor piercing technologies to harden the projectile. So that's what we intend to do as a first order of business. As soon as with the DoD grant, some type of grant, as soon as 2026, we can do that and be producing and selling and being a supplier for antimony. Again, with the antimony grant, the DoD grant, we're well advanced. You don't know until the cash is in the bank, but we're feeling very positive about that. And the field season's just around the corner. And to get that online, that production online by 2026, that's what we're aiming to do in our proposal. And so that's the prospect, or that's the project. And what you see here is decades and decades of mine life, multiple mining centers producing multiple commodities over that time period. Here's the flow sheet again. We talked about most of this. Once we spent the energy, the time, and to crush all this material down and extract the gold. The other thing we're working on with the U.S. government is we're looking at critical minerals extraction out of the waste streams, and we have the opportunity to do that. This is how China has captured the market. We tend to just focus on the primary commodity and throw the rest away. Well, we're looking at development studies and the capital required to put in these waste stream critical minerals extraction plants. We can do that with our flotation circuit for things like antimony. And then after we've leached the gold out, usually just goes off to a tailings facility. We're talking about diverting that and putting it through a critical minerals extraction plant, because we have highly elevated concentrations of things like gallium, tungsten, scandium, bismuth. Has been in the news lately. So those are especially at RPM, good business there. And so that's what we're talking about. Development studies, additional Department of Defense grants to get these critical minerals and bring that production back to the United States as well. And they see our project really at the center of that effort here in Alaska. And this is our grand vision, particularly with the antimony and critical minerals. What we're talking about, mining it on our site. So all this is DoD grant dependent. Mining it on our site, concentrating it on our site, initially producing that antimony trisulfide, which is, like I said, a straightforward task, but ultimately longer term, putting an antimony refinery here in Alaska. They love the location. It's a multimodal port. There's so much further antimony potential, not only with our project, but other projects across Alaska. And if they have an incentive to produce a feedstock, and certain projects to even come online, if they have a central refinery here in Alaska to not only support the DoD, but also the entire U.S. industrial base with not only antimony trisulfide, but antimony oxide, antimony metal, antimony compounds for the semiconductor industry, and these type of things, all based here in Alaska with our project at the center of that. That's our grand vision and what we're working on with the DoD on. Here's a timeline. So we're currently in feasibility study stage, and we're doing our studies to produce our feasibility study. That includes metallurgical test work, another round of drilling this year, and we're hoping to get that out as soon as possible. As being on state land, the permitting process, we expect to take about 12 to 18 months. So best case scenario, we're looking at production out of RPM somewhere in 2027, 2028 in this area, and then growing ourselves into the larger project in 2028 and beyond on the gold side. And then, of course, there's this opportunity with the antimony and gold, with the DoD grant that we're feeling positive about, to get that online here ASAP for production of antimony trisulfide for the munitions in 2026. In addition to that, so that's our path to production. Of course, there's all the exploration upside that we continue to work on. So all of that happening concurrently with further discoveries and exciting news flow from that. Here's our team. We think we got a pretty deep bench here of mining expertise. Myself, I'm an economic geologist, been doing this for 30 years all around the world, taking resource stage projects, bringing them into production, a long list of those. I'm back home in Alaska, live here, work here, pushing the project day and night. And the rest of the crew, mining engineers, metallurgists, finance guys, and of course, I failed to mention our secret weapon, Mr. Hans Hoffman. That's our exploration manager out there, key in advancing these projects on a daily basis out there and making these further discoveries. Quick corporate snapshot. You look at some of these graphs here. We did list on the NASDAQ. We have a dual listing now on the NASDAQ that happened in August last year, and we're starting to get our story out. Initially really taken up well, good volumes, this and that. It's been a bit tough sector wide here, but we're certainly have produced value for our shareholders there. And then, so there's an opportunity there, especially with grants coming online and these kind of things, Nova as an investment. Also, then just with the sector, the gold prices just spiked. But if you look at the overall index of gold stocks, this is the VanEck Junior Miner. I mean, there's a big gap there. So when that catches up, Nova Minerals is certainly one of these companies that'll benefit from that. We got our holders. We're relatively tightly held. Directors and management, we hold about 7% of the company. We've always participated in the capital raisings along the way, and we'll continue to do so. Lots of skin in the game. Our main institutional holder is Nabari Gold Fund, and they really got on board. They're ready for this feasibility to come out and get involved with the project finance side of things. That's really what they do, and we have a number of other groups ready to go. 320 million shares on issue, few options and performance rights floating around, set to expire. Out of the money on those, currently $8 million of cash in the bank and no debt. So that cash will be used for RPM and the feasibility study and the drilling this year. And then, of course, we're awaiting good news on a potential grant here to go into to further fill our coffers to really go after this antimony potential. Catalysts coming up. I keep mentioning it. The grants. Permitting, we are starting to permit. We're permitting some roads and other things right now, and we've received some from the state. Resource drilling and exploration. We hope to get. It's been a very, very mild winter here in Alaska. We hope to get started that as soon as possible here in May, hopefully. I outlined what we have planned there. It'll probably be the biggest season yet. Technical studies, lots of metallurgical test work, environmental studies happening and will continue to happen here. And then resource updates with all the drilling that we'll do this year with the gold and the antimony, everything converging then on the feasibility study, which we're working on and doing all the background work now and all the studies that feed into that and get that out as soon as possible. So just to wrap it up, favorable drivers here being in Alaska, favorable jurisdiction, with all the geopolitical and sovereign risks in the world. I mean, I think we can see that production is really coming back to the U.S. We're here, and then being on state of Alaska land is another big bonus. We're an aspiring gold producer and antimony producer, not here to flip the project. That's not our strategic objective. Of course, we would consider strategic partnerships, as I mentioned, some of these majors and mid-tiers, who would really ramp things up and get us moving here. Myself, I'm from Alaska, pushing things day and night in the trenches. Low discovery cost per ounce. Anything less than about $10 per ounce is amazing in this business, but because it's mostly outcropping out there, doesn't require any deep searching, complicated, expensive exploration techniques just yet, which is, going after the low-hanging fruit, that open pit, low strip, bulk mineable deposits we see right on the surface, thick, high-grade zones that we also see. I think we've demonstrated that at RPM for sure. And then the significant resource upside potential as we continue our drilling and continue our work, certainly by the end of this year, early in the next year when we come out with those resource updates, that'll be shown not only with the gold, but as well with the antimony now as well. And there's underground potential further along. There's underground potential at all these deposits. They're wide open, but we're just going after the low-hanging fruit surface stuff right now. And then there's all these are very attractive near-term catalysts and a good opportunity for the investor. So I'll leave it at that. And, just all that content, much, much more on our website. Urge people to go there, check it out, and I'll open it up for questions now.
Thank you very much, Chris. If you would like to speak to Chris, use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window there. Nearby, you'll see the Q&A button. Click that if you would like to type your question into the text box, as some have done already. Chris, are you planning to take on debt to further drilling programs?
To take on debt? No. We just extinguished the little bit of debt that we have, so we're quite debt averse. So the answer to that is no, absolutely no. Yeah. What we're looking at, I'll just elaborate. So what we're looking at with the grants, that's non-dilutive funding. So that will be, not only will we be able to go after Stibium prospect first and produce antimony, but also you saw the good gold values in that, so there'll be some gold production from that as well. And that's all non-dilutive funding. The other bonus with the grant is that many of the fixed costs, like support costs, camp and things like that, can be covered if we get this grant, can be covered by that. Then our dollars, that $8 million that we have, that we get better bang for the buck, because we'll just be able to utilize that on drilling, whereas the support costs will be covered by any grant funding. So that, and then no plans for it at the moment, but if further afield, we'll do equity finance, no debt.
Chris, this person wants to know, could you foresee a critical minerals executive order?
There already has been.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. There's been about 3 of them. So there was the executive order. It was literally titled Unleashing Alaska's Mineral Potential, that was signed on day 1 by the current administration, by Trump. And just more recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was a mineral executive order expediting permitting and regulatory expediting the process for permitting and regulatory. So yes, and then there's another one. I can't recall exactly what that one was titled, but yes, they've been coming fast and feverishly, particularly focused on Alaska as well to unlock or unleash the mineral potential in Alaska were the exact words. So there already have been 3 that I know of, and just working on this Department of Defense grant. I've been to Washington D.C. and just being around the traps there with various agencies. Absolutely, there's a big push on to bring that production. We've been so beholden to China, in particular, China and even Russia, for things like antimony and some of these critical elements, that there's a big push for production to be onshored. And again, we're at the center of that, right?
How long do you expect the $8 million in cash to last? And what was the burn rate the past 12 months?
Okay, so we run when we're not drilling, we only spend a couple $100,000 a month, roughly. We have a few studies going on. It could be anywhere between $200,000 to $400,000 a month. In the last couple of months, with some of the work nearing its end, it's been like around $200,000 a month maximum. And so the money that we have, of course, when we start drilling, then depending on the size of the drilling program, we start to spend millions every month. And so our plans this year, with the cash that we have, it'll be tight, but to complete the drilling at RPM that we have planned and complete the studies that we have ongoing to get us to that feasibility, Now, of course, with grant funding, significant grant funding, those dollars will take us a lot further, and we can make the feasibility study, which is our intention, very, very, very robust, not just checking all the boxes. And that's our intention. And again, I feel very positive that that'll happen. So we think we can get to the feasibility study for RPM with the current cash we have.
How much of a grant is realistic to expect if it came through? When would it be received, and what exactly would be done with it?
Okay, so I can't talk about those type of details about amounts. Now, I will say that we're well advanced, and it's well known that in Alaska we're beholden to the seasons a bit. I mean, although we can go year round on our project, it does get more expensive, and there's some challenges. We're working over the winter time, and the season's about to start here in May, and we would like to kick it off and be most productive and achieve our objectives. What are our objectives? And so what a grant would be used for is drilling, resource. So that would all happen. This would all happen this year. Drilling, resource, mine plan, start bringing in mine equipment and a processing facility. It is pilot scale. It is pilot scale just because it's the antimony trisulfide that we're after initially. So a pilot scale plant and some mining equipment, bringing that in next winter to be and construct that and commence extraction next 2026, spring of 2026. And while we're setting up the processing plant and starting to stockpile ore, and then in the processing plant is it's just mainly a mechanical. You're doing some gravity there, a little bit of flotation, producing that concentrate, and then, like I said, you just pulverize it down. So our objective is by Q3 2026 be producing antimony concentrate, and then by the end of 2026 into early 2027, perhaps be actually having that final military grade antimony trisulfide product. So that's the objective with the grant. All of that, from drilling all the way to production.
That $100 million in CapEx, would that be in Australian dollars or US dollars?
That's for the RPM. That's US. All numbers US.
Has construction started on the Western Access Road yet?
No, they have not broke ground yet, although they are in the schedule and the timeline. That first part, which is part of the Department of Transportation, the first half of the road is already in the Department of Transportation STIP, State Transportation and Infrastructure Plan. So it's already been scheduled, and there's a budget there. It's 90% federal dollars that'll build that as well. And that schedule has them breaking ground this year, but the season hasn't really opened up yet. Again, it's aligned to our field season as well. May, June is when these projects usually get started.
Regarding the antimony deposit, when do you expect that feasibility study to be out, and how much is it going to cost?
Okay, so with the antimony, that does not require like a feasibility study as the markets would require, because it's all conditional upon the grant. What the objective there is to produce antimony trisulfide. So what the investor would expect in terms of a feasibility study is not a prerequisite for moving towards production. I'll just note that. So what we intend to do is come up with a mine plan to, with our resource, and many of these initially will be internal documents, a mine plan to then justify making the extra expenditure for some of the mining equipment and the processing plant to move into the 2026 timeframe to produce. So all of that. So the mine plan, let's call that would be equivalent to the feasibility study and the gold. The mine plan for the DoD and antimony production will be completed before the end of this year, with the drilling based on the drilling that we'll be doing.
Could you speak about any permitting requirements and timing for that antimony deposit? And this person wants to know the expected output of antimony in 2026 and 2027.
Okay, so that'll be the output and the production will be dictated by the resource. But in terms of the permitting, we're all on state land here, so we don't have to deal with federal lands, even though, the thinking is, and certainly some of the things we've done with this executive order, that the permitting is becoming more streamlined, even on the federal side. But nevertheless, we're on state land. What the initial phase one of this project is pilot scale, and many of the aspects of that we're allowed to do under our existing permitting regime. We're allowed to do pilot scale testing, bulk sampling, bulk test work, and that's what we're classifying this phase one of the project as. And it'll be small scale. But the ultimate production levels and these type of things will be dictated by the resource, the drilling, the resource. We'll get a grade and tons, understanding spatially where it sits, and then develop our mine plan. And those numbers should start to be understood here by the end of the year.
U.S. Antimony, UAMY, is the only option for domestic smelting and processing at the moment. Is the goal or to finished product completely in Alaska?
Yes, that is the ultimate goal. That is correct. So phase one will be producing antimony trisulfide, and then phase two, which is something we're discussing with the DoD as well. Beyond, after we're successful with phase one, then going beyond, and that's several additional years out, and that'll require establishing that full-on refinery here in Alaska to produce oxide, metal, like I mentioned, all these other antimony products, in addition to the trisulfide. So yes, you mentioned U.S. Antimony, and I let those guys talk for themselves. But if you look, they have the plant in Montana there. And even at full capacity, if they were at full capacity, their issue is they don't have any ore. They have that plant there, bit of an aged plant, and they can't produce all the products. And even at full capacity, if they had enough concentrate and ore, then they would only be like 3 or 4% of required demand in the U.S. I mean, the demand in the U.S. is 35,000 tons of all additional antimony of all antimony refined products, and growing rapidly. And so I think antimony does U.S. antimony, even if they were at full capacity, as I understand, they're about half capacity now because they don't have that feedstock. That even if they were at full capacity, they would be producing maybe 5% of that demand. And that's where we come in to bring this, state-of-the-art plant hub here in Alaska, where the resources are, where the feedstock is, our project at the center of that to feed into that plant. And then having that plant here, across Alaska, there's numerous other projects that are either producing and they just throw the antimony away, or there's projects sitting there that will come online with that incentive that now they have a place to send it to, and then establish that here in Alaska to fully secure the U.S. supply chains and take a major chunk out of that, if not all of that 35,000 ton demand requirement for the U.S. and potentially beyond as an export product. So that's really what we're moving towards here at Nova Minerals.
What is the level of collaboration with US Gold, ticker USGO? Is a merger on the cards?
Uh, we know those guys very well. In fact, we share their camps on the other side of the airstrip there. It's kind of interesting. That project I think was dormant for about 8-10 years. They're just starting to do some work out there. And if you do a comparison, I think they're running over 100 million market cap, and ours is like 50 million. So it's kind of interesting that we're much more advanced, more advanced than they are, moving into feasibility, potential antimony production, and yet we're not getting any love. So do we work with them? Yes, we work closely with them day to day. We help them out quite a bit when they got started, and we're rising tides lift all boats kind of people. And in terms of a merger acquisition, a lot of people say it's not if, it's just when. Certainly that, and I talk to Tim over there all the time, and we appreciate that would create a pretty serious company. So there's no deals on the table or anything like that, but we're well aware of the potential uh, for shareholder value on both sides for that. So I'll just leave it at that.
What is your forecast for revenues from production of gold and antimony in 2025 and 2026? And how many years until Nova becomes profitable?
So I don't have those numbers just yet. That'll be on the mine plan and the mine schedule, and we'll understand those numbers. So it'd be remiss for me to even talk about that right now. However, with the antimony, we're looking at production end of 2026, and then of course the gold best case scenario would be out, closer to 2028. And the type of project that we're looking at, like I said, something in that $100 million capex range for the gold now. 100 million capex range, and you know, it, with these numbers, it's I can't really come out and say, but there's some pretty good back of the envelope numbers that we're seeing from that high grade 5 gram material right on the surface. We'll get straight into there at RPM, and then enough cash flow to be able to grow ourselves into the larger project. So we're expecting a very decent windfall here as soon as 2028 from the gold, best case scenario, and then as soon as 2026 from the antimony. And I'll just leave that at that as well.
Okay, and our final question today, Chris, for your pilot plant size. What would the expected output be with a pilot plant?
So again, the scale, the size, and the scale, and what that pilot plant looks like will depend on the resource. I mean, what is the grade of the material that we're taking out? So I would think something in the thousands to tens of thousands of tons of input, and then output depends on the grade. And I just don't know that answer just yet.
Chris, thanks a lot. We have some questions that we just weren't able to get to. You can email your question to us at nva@redchip.com, and I will make sure that Chris sees it. You can also call us at 1-800-REDCHIP for more information on Nova Minerals. Please make sure you visit the information page created by Redchip for Nova. It's nvainfo.com. There, you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on Nova Minerals. And now, with Redchip's new AI assistant, Red Chat, which is integrated into nvainfo.com, you can ask questions of our AI assistant about Nova, and you will get your answers very quickly. You can also try the chatbot on red.chat. Please also watch Redchip's program, Small Stocks, Big Money, every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg USA. And that does it. Thank you very much to our many participants today, and thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.